Billionaire dad watches Black girl. Care for his disabled son. What happens next? Changes her life forever. It was a quiet afternoon when a billionaire father watched from a distance as a young black girl, a stranger to him, carefully and lovingly, fed his disabled son. She had no idea that the man observing her from across the room was the father of the boy she was helping, nor did she know that this simple act of kindness would soon alter the course of her life. The boy, who had been born with a condition that made everyday tasks a challenge, had grown used to people ignoring his needs or treating him differently. But this girl, with her warmth and natural compassion, was different. As she spoke to him, gently, and fed him with such patience, the father was moved in a way he hadn't expected. He saw something in her that was rare, a deep sense of empathy, strength, and a heart of gold. In that moment, he made a decision that would not only change her life but give her the opportunities she deserved. What happened next was a gesture of kindness and opportunity that few could ever imagine, proving that even the smallest acts of care can lead to life-changing consequences. If you enjoyed this incredible story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps us bring you more powerful and inspiring stories like this one. Kendra lived in a modest home with her hard-working mother, who had raised her single-handedly. Life wasn't easy, but they made it work. Kendra had always been a focused and determined student, always looking for ways to improve herself and make something of her life. Despite the challenges they faced, her mother had instilled in her a deep sense of pride and taught her the value of hard work, perseverance, and compassion. Kendra often helped out around the house and volunteered in the community, helping younger kids with their homework and spending time with the elderly in the neighborhood. She had always dreamed of creating a better life for herself and her mother, hoping that one day she could give her mother the comfortable retirement she deserved. Every time Kendra walked home from school, she couldn't help but think about how hard her mom worked to make ends meet. It wasn't the life she envisioned for herself or her mom, but Kendra always told herself she would make it better someday. That afternoon, as Kendra walked home from school, she noticed a large, elegant mansion that was completely different from the modest homes in her neighborhood. Outside the mansion, there was a sign that immediately caught her attention: "Caretaker needed." The words seemed to jump off the sign and into her mind. Curiosity piqued. Kendra walked closer, her eyes scanning the description of the job. The role was for a caretaker to assist with a disabled young man. The job itself seemed perfect for Kendra. She loved helping others, especially those who needed it most. She knew this could be her chance to not only earn some extra money, but also gain some valuable experience. Kendra had been looking for work to help out at home, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, she wrote down the contact information and decided to apply. That night, she told her mother about the job opening, and her mom, always supportive, encouraged her to give it a try. The next day, Kendra nervously dialed the number listed on the sign and scheduled an interview. She dressed neatly, put on her best smile, and made her way to the mansion, never expecting what this one decision would lead to. Little did Kendra know, this seemingly simple job would not only change the course of her life, but would also bring her face-to-face with challenges, opportunities, and people she never could have imagined. She had no idea that stepping into that mansion would be the first step toward a future that was beyond anything she had dreamed of. Kendra lived in a modest home with her hard-working mother, who had raised her single-handedly. Life wasn't always easy, but they made it work. Kendra had always been a determined student, eager to make something of herself, and a caring soul, always willing to help those in need. Despite the challenges they faced, her mother instilled a sense of pride in her, teaching her the value of hard work, perseverance, and compassion. Growing up, Kendra loved to spend her free time volunteering at the local community center, helping younger children with their homework, and spending time with the elderly residents of the neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it brought Kendra joy to know she could make someone else's day a little brighter. She often dreamed of a better life, one where she could give back even more and help her mother retire comfortably. Kendra would imagine herself making enough money to support both her and her mom, paying off bills, and living a life where they didn't have to worry about the little things anymore. One afternoon, as Kendra was walking home from school, she noticed a sign posted outside a mansion in her neighborhood. Caretaker needed. The house was large, far grander than anything Kendra had ever seen, and the job description sounded perfect for someone like her. Seeking a responsible, compassionate individual to assist with the care of a disabled young man. Kendra, sensing an opportunity, quickly took down the contact information and decided to apply. Little did she know that this small decision would change the course of her future in ways she never could have imagined. The next day, Kendra nervously walked up to the massive gates of the mansion and rang the doorbell. She was greeted by a woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Mrs. Sanders, the house manager. Mrs. Sanders led Kendra inside the grand foyer and explained the details of the job. Her son, Ethan, was 19 years old and had been paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident 2 years ago. Ethan's father, Mr. Clark Sanders, was a billionaire and the owner of a successful tech company. Since Ethan's accident, the family had been looking for someone to assist him with daily tasks and provide him with companionship, given his condition. Kendra felt a deep sympathy for Ethan but was excited about the opportunity. She agreed to the terms of the job and started the very next day. Her role was simple: help Ethan with his daily needs, assist him in and out of his wheelchair, and help with personal tasks like reading to him and playing games. Ethan, though quiet and reserved, was polite and grateful. Kendra felt a sense of pride in helping him, and over time, they developed a close bond. However, things weren't always easy. Kendra noticed that despite the wealth and privilege surrounding Ethan, he seemed lonely. His family was often absent, consumed by business, matters, and other obligations. He would sometimes stare out of the window, longing for something more than his lavish surroundings. It was evident that, despite his father's wealth and his mother's best efforts, Ethan felt isolated and disconnected from the world outside, his mansion. Kendra could see the emotional toll it had on him. She started to realize that her role wasn't just about assisting Ethan with physical tasks. It was also about providing him with companionship, offering him someone to talk to, and helping him find purpose beyond his circumstances. As time went on, Kendra and Ethan became good friends. She listened to his stories, shared her own, and offered him a sense of normalcy. But even with their growing bond, there were days when Ethan would withdraw into himself, and Kendra could only wonder what it must have felt like to live in such isolation. Despite all the wealth and resources at his disposal, Ethan longed for something deeper, something real. Kendra, however, was determined to help him find that connection. One evening, as Kendra was preparing dinner for Ethan, she overheard a conversation between Mrs. Sanders and Mr. Sanders in the living room. The voices were hushed, but Kendra's curiosity got the best of her as she caught snippets of the conversation. From what she could gather, it seemed the Sanders family was facing financial difficulties, which was a stark contrast to the opulence that surrounded her every day. Mrs. Sanders and Mr. Sanders discussed how their company's profits had dropped and how they were considering making significant cuts. Downsizing certain parts of the business was now on the table, and Kendra couldn't help but overhear the tension in their voices as they tried to figure out what steps to take next. As Kendra continued with her tasks, her mind couldn't help but wander back to their conversation. She had grown comfortable in her role as Ethan's caretaker, and the bond they were forming felt special, but now there was a strange shift in the air. She couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right in the household. Over the next few weeks, Kendra began to notice subtle changes. Mrs. Sanders, once warm and engaging, started to seem more distant. She had always been hands-off, in Ethan's care, but now even the little interactions seemed strained. She was hardly ever home, leaving Ethan alone for long stretches of time as she focused more on the family's business. Mr. Sanders, too, seemed to be absent more often, buried in meetings and calls about the state of their finances. This left Kendra to care for Ethan even more, but she didn't mind. He had become like a younger brother to her, and she felt deeply connected to him. But despite her best efforts, she could sense a change in Ethan's demeanor as well. He was more withdrawn, quieter than usual, and often stared out the windows of his mansion, lost in thought. It was as though the wealth and luxury that surrounded him couldn't replace the emotional toll of his isolation. And to make matters worse, Kendra felt like she was losing her place in the Sanders household. Her role as Ethan's caretaker was becoming more and more of a secondary concern. The family's preoccupation with their financial troubles had left her feeling pushed out of their inner circle. The once warm and welcoming atmosphere of the house now felt cold, and Kendra began to notice the subtle signs of tension between her and the family. Mrs. Sanders no longer greeted her with a smile when she came home. The conversations with Ethan's father were short and distant, as if she were just another employee in the house. Kendra's heart ached as she realized that despite all her dedication and hard work, she was slowly becoming invisible to the family she had grown close to. The more time passed, the more isolated she felt, and her once promising role as Ethan's caretaker now seemed uncertain. She had grown to care deeply for Ethan, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that her purpose in the Sanders world was fading, and she feared her time in the mansion would soon come to an end. Despite the shift in the household dynamics, Kendra continued to give her best to Ethan, doing her best to fill the emotional gap left by his absent family. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away, and the future she had envisioned in this mansion was slowly unraveling before her eyes. One day, while Kendra was assisting Ethan with his wheelchair, he suddenly turned to her with a serious expression, his usually reserved demeanor replaced by an unexpected vulnerability. "Kendra," he began, his voice quiet and sincere, "you've been so kind to me. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for everything you've done." Kendra smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest, brushing off the compliment with a light laugh. But Ethan wasn't finished. "No, really. My father is always so busy, and my mother is always worried about business. I haven't had anyone to talk to in so long. You've been a true friend to me, and I think that's more important than any money or power." Hearing these words struck Kendra deeply. Despite everything, despite the mansion, the wealth, and the comforts Ethan had, he was lonely, missing the human connection and companionship that everyone craved, no matter their circumstances. In that moment, Kendra understood the depth of Ethan's isolation, and she felt a surge of compassion for him. It reminded her so much of her own childhood when she had faced loneliness and uncertainty, especially when her mother had struggled to make ends meet. She reassured Ethan that she would always be there for him, that he was not alone, and that their bond went beyond the professional relationship they had. However, as things began to improve between them, with their friendship growing stronger, the Sanders family dropped a bombshell that would change everything. Mrs. Sanders, with her usual tight-lipped expression, informed Kendra that due to the financial difficulties they were facing, they would be downsizing and letting some staff go. Unfortunately, Kendra was one of those affected. Hearing those words hit Kendra like a punch to the gut. She had worked so hard to connect with Ethan, to help him find solace in his isolation, and now it felt like everything was being ripped away from her. She had developed a bond with Ethan, one that transcended the job, but she knew that the family's business decisions were beyond her control. She tried to remain calm, not wanting to show the depth of her heartbreak, but the sadness was undeniable. Packing her things, Kendra felt as though she was leaving not just a job, but a chapter of her life she had come to cherish. The mansion, once a place where she had felt needed and appreciated, now felt empty, like a symbol of everything she had worked toward that was suddenly slipping away. Kendra left the mansion feeling unsure of what her next steps would be. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Her connection with Ethan was real, and the memories they had shared would always stay with her, no matter where she went next. The chapter with the Sanders family was over, but it had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, friendship, and the importance of staying true to herself, no matter the obstacles. The following day, just as Kendra was preparing to leave, her phone rang. It was Mr. Clark Sanders. He asked her to meet him at the mansion. Filled with confusion and anxiety, Kendra made her way back to the grand home, uncertain of what awaited her. When she arrived, she was ushered into Mr. Sanders's luxurious office, an imposing space filled with elegant furniture and polished decor. Kendra, still processing the news of her departure, sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. To her surprise, Mr. Sanders wasn't angry or frustrated. Instead, he greeted her with a calm and composed smile. "Kendra," he began, his tone warm and appreciative, "you've done more for Ethan than anyone else in this family has. You've been a true friend to him, and I've watched you these past few weeks. I can see how much you care for him." Kendra was taken aback, unsure of how to respond, but Mr. Sanders continued. "I want to offer you a deal that could change your life," he said, his words carrying the weight of something important. "I want to hire you as a consultant for my business, to help us navigate through this tough time. You've got potential, and I can see it. You've already made a difference in Ethan's life, and I believe you can help us turn things around." Kendra's heart raced as she absorbed his words. The family who had once made her feel disposable and unimportant was now offering her an opportunity to change the course of her life. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same family that had let her go was now recognizing her worth and asking for her help. She sat there, almost unable to believe it, but then the realization hit her. This was the moment she had worked for. Her genuine care for Ethan had led her here. It wasn't just her qualifications or expertise. It was the way she treated people, the way she went above and beyond for someone who needed her. Kendra didn't hesitate for long. She accepted the offer, knowing that this was a chance to prove herself even further. The role wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder, it was about making an impact. This was more than a career change. It was validation for all her hard work, her kindness, and her resilience. She had learned from the challenges she'd faced and knew that empathy, integrity, and a relentless work ethic could open doors that seemed out of reach. For Kendra, the opportunity with the Sanders family was not just a job offer, it was a turning point. She had gone from being a caregiver to Ethan, to becoming an essential part of the family's business strategy, all because of her actions and character. Her heart swelled with pride and gratitude, but she was also deeply aware of how much this moment symbolized. Her value wasn't based on her circumstances or the judgment of others. It was about how she treated people and the difference she made in their lives. This was a moment she would never forget, and one that would shape her future. As she left the mansion that day, Kendra felt as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was no longer just the girl from the neighborhood or the caretaker for Ethan. She was a woman with a future, one that she had created through kindness, empathy, and resilience. It wasn't just about the deal, it was about proving that the power to change your life lay in how you treated others.